For 6 days, Joshua has led 2 million people in silence around Jericho's fortifications. Once each day. No battle cry, no siege engines, no ladders, just footsteps and the sound of ram's horns. The priests carry the Ark of the Covenant. The armed men march ahead. The people follow. Inside the city, people watch from the walls. Maybe they laugh. Maybe they wonder. Maybe they prepare for conventional warfare that never comes. Now it's the 7th day. Not once around the city, 7 times. The march continues. First circuit, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. The defenders grow nervous. What kind of army walks in circles? The 7th time around, Joshua raises his hand. The priests blow a long blast on the horns. Joshua shouts, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." 2 million voices explode in a roar. The ground trembles, and then, impossible, inexplicable, undeniable, the walls of Jericho collapse. Not breached, not scaled, collapsed into rubble. Every section. The Israelites rush in. The victory belongs to the Lord, not to military might. This is Joshua's first battle in the Promised Land, a test of faith more than strategy, a demonstration that the God who parted seas can crumble walls. But this isn't where Joshua's story begins. It begins 40 years earlier, with a man who dared to tell the truth when 10 others lied. Act 1. The spy who stood alone. When faith faced giants. Joshua was born in Egypt before the Exodus, originally named Hosea, meaning salvation. Moses changed his name to Yehoshua, Joshua, meaning Yahweh is salvation. He came from the tribe of Ephraim, descended from Joseph. Joshua began as Moses' aide, demonstrating faith and military skills. He accompanied Moses partway up Mount Sinai when God gave the 10 Commandments. He dwelt in the tent of meeting and wished to protect Moses from competition. Under Joshua's leadership, the people of Israel fought against Amalek. As they battled, Moses kept his hands raised, and the Israelites prevailed. Thus, Joshua and his troops defeated Amalek. But Joshua's defining moment came at Kadesh Barnea. Moses sent 12 spies into Canaan to scout the Promised Land. For 40 days they explored, seeing fortified cities, abundant produce, and formidable inhabitants. Joshua was one of the 12 spies sent by Moses to explore the land of Canaan. 10 spies returned with terrifying reports. The people are strong. The cities are fortified. We saw the Nephilim, giants. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes. Only 2 dissented, Joshua and Caleb. They brought the same evidence, but reached different conclusions. The land is good, they said. If the Lord delights in us, he will give it to us. Do not fear the people of the land. The Lord is with us. The congregation wanted to stone them. 2 men of faith against millions of fear. God intervened, declaring that this generation would die in the wilderness. For 40 years they would wander, 1 year for each day the spies explored. Only Joshua and Caleb from that generation would enter the Promised Land. 40 years, because fear prevailed over faith, because 10 voices of doubt drowned 2 voices of truth. Joshua learned something crucial that day. Majorities can be wrong. Consensus doesn't equal truth. What God promises, he will deliver, no matter how many giants stand in the way. Act 2. The torch passes, when the understudy becomes the star. When God told Moses it was time for him to die, Joshua was chosen as Moses' successor. God chose Joshua, described as a man with spirit, to be Moses' successor, though he was to share power with the high priest Eleazar. Imagine the weight. Moses spoke with God face to face. Moses parted the Red Sea. Moses brought water from rocks. Moses received the law on Sinai. And now Joshua, the former aide, the minority spy, the patient warrior, must follow him. Moses died at age 120 on Mount Nebo. God buried him. Then God commissioned Joshua. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them. God made Joshua a promise. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Then came the command that would define Joshua's leadership. Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Strong, courageous, not because of his own strength, because God was with him. Act 3. Crossing the impossible. When rivers stand on end. The Israelites were encamped at Shittim, opposite Jericho, ready to cross the Jordan River. But the Jordan was at flood stage, banks overflowing, current dangerous, crossing with 2 million people, livestock, and possessions, impossible. Joshua secretly sent 2 spies to Jericho. They entered the house of Rahab, a prostitute whose house was built against the outer retaining wall. When the king of Jericho demanded Rahab reveal the spies, she hid them on her roof under flax and told him she didn't know where they went. Rahab professed her faith in God to the men, acknowledging her belief that Canaan was divinely reserved for the Israelites from the beginning. She said, I know that the Lord has given you this land. All who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. The spies promised to spare her family when they attacked. She helped them escape through her window. The Israelites then crossed the Jordan River through a miraculous intervention of God. When the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant stepped into the river, the waters miraculously stopped flowing, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry ground. The Lord dried up the waters of the Jordan just as God did to the Red Sea. 2 million people crossed on dry ground. The parallel to Moses and the Red Sea was unmistakable. God was showing Israel the same power that worked through Moses now works through Joshua. Act 4. When walls fall. The battle that defied logic. As Joshua approached Jericho, he met an angelic figure. Joshua asked, Are you for us or for our adversaries? The angel answered, No, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come. The angel commanded Joshua to remove his sandals because he stood on holy ground, the same command God gave Moses at the burning bush. Jericho was built on a large hill with massive walls, giving it an enviable high ground over any invading force. A siege could last for months, but God's strategy was different. God commanded Joshua to march around the walls of Jericho for 6 days, once every day, with 7 priests blowing horns and the Ark of the Covenant in front. On the 7th day, they were to circle the city 7 times. The command seemed strange, but Joshua did everything God commanded. For 7 days, risking his entire credibility, Joshua led 2 million people in circles around impenetrable walls. No attack, no rams, no ladders, just obedience. On the 7th day, after the 7th circuit, the Israelites shouted, and the city walls fell beneath them. The Israelites then killed every person, men, women, young and old, as well as the oxen, sheep, and donkeys. Only Rahab and her family were spared and incorporated into Israel. Joshua then cursed anybody who rebuilt Jericho, prophesying their firstborn and youngest child would die. This was eventually fulfilled by Heel the Bethelite under King Ahab's reign. The impossible had happened. Faith had toppled what force could not. but victory breeds its own temptations. Act 5. When disobedience costs everything. The sin of Achan. The next target was Ai, a smaller city, but Israel was defeated because Achan had taken forbidden items from Jericho, a beautiful Babylonian garment, silver, and a wedge of gold. 36 Israelite soldiers died. Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down before the ark. "Why did you bring us across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites?" God revealed the defeat was because someone had violated the Herem command by taking accursed things. The guilty must be destroyed. Through Lot, God identified Achan from the tribe of Judah. Achan confessed to taking a Babylonian garment, silver, and gold. He and his children were stoned and burned. The severity shocks modern readers, but the lesson was clear. One person's sin endangers the entire community. Secret disobedience has public consequences. With the sin confessed and dealt with, God renewed his covenant. Israel attacked Ai again and won complete victory, killing everyone and hanging the king from a tree until evening. Act 6. When the sun stood still. When heaven obeyed a man. The people of Gibeon, fearing Israel, resorted to deception. They dressed in worn-out clothes, carried moldy bread, and claimed to come from a distant land, asking for a peace treaty. Joshua and his Israelites made a decision and entered a treaty without consulting the Lord. 3 days later, they discovered the Gibeonites lived nearby. The treaty couldn't be broken. They had sworn by God. Instead, Joshua made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for Israel and the altar of the Lord. When 5 Amorite kings from Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon heard the Gibeonites had made peace with Israel, they joined forces to attack Gibeon. The Gibeonites sent urgent word to Joshua, "Don't abandon us, come at once, save us." Joshua and his entire army, including his best warriors, marched all night from Gilgal to Gibeon, 20 miles overnight. God promised, "Do not fear them, for I have delivered them into your hand." The battle raged. The Lord fought with the Israelites, throwing large hailstones down on the Amorites. The hailstones killed more of them than the swords of the Israelites did. Then Joshua did something unprecedented. In the presence of all Israel, Joshua spoke to the Lord, "O sun, stand still over Gibeon, and O moon over the valley of Aijalon." The sun stopped in its tracks in mid-sky and stayed there all day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to the voice of a man. Truly, God fought for Israel. According to Joshua 10:14, this miracle of stopping the sun is the only miracle in which God listens to a human's command. Whether a literal stopping of Earth's rotation or an eclipse or extended twilight, the text is clear. Joshua asked, God answered. Time itself bent to accommodate faith. Act 7. Dividing the inheritance, when promise becomes possession. According to Caleb's testimony, the conquest took 7 years. Joshua led campaigns in central, southern, and northern Canaan, destroying enemies and conquering cities like Libnah, Lachish, Eglon, Hebron, and Debir. After the victories, Joshua divided the conquered lands among the 12 tribes of Israel by lot. This land distribution was a covenantal land grant, Yahweh as king, issuing each tribe its territory. The tabernacle was established at Shiloh, 6 cities of refuge were appointed, and 48 cities assigned to the Levites. When all was allotted, Timnath-Serah in Mount Ephraim was assigned by the people as Joshua's inheritance. But the text includes an uncomfortable truth. While chapter 12 proclaimed the Canaanites had disappeared, chapter 13 records God saying there still remains very much land to be possessed. Jerusalem remained unconquered. In several regions, Canaanites still lived among the Israelites. The conquest was real, but incomplete, a pattern that would haunt Israel for generations. Act 8. The Farewell. When the warrior becomes a prophet. If Joshua was near Caleb's age of 85 when the land was distributed, and he was 110 when he died, his farewell speeches came about 25 years after the main conquests. Joshua, knowing death was near, called a national assembly, including all Israel with their elders, leaders, judges, and officials. He assembled them at Shechem and recounted God's faithfulness from Abraham's call through Egypt's slavery to the conquest of Canaan. Then came the challenge. Choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served beyond the river or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. The people responded, Far be it from us to forsake the Lord. We will serve the Lord our God and obey him. Joshua served as the mediator of the renewed covenant between Yahweh and Israel at Shechem, just as Moses was the mediator at Mount Sinai. He set up a large stone as a witness against them if they proved false to their vow. After these things, Joshua son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110, and was buried in his allotted inheritance in Timnath-Serah, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. Moses had lived to 120, Joshua to 110. Joshua lived to the same age as his ancestor Joseph. The Israelites also buried Joseph's bones, which they had carried from Egypt for 40 years, at Shechem, in the plot Jacob had purchased centuries earlier. Israel served the Lord throughout Joshua's lifetime and throughout the lifetime of the elders who outlived him and had experienced everything the Lord had done for Israel. But after that generation died, another generation arose, which knew neither Yahweh nor the deeds he had done for Israel. The cycle of faithfulness and apostasy, chronicled in Judges, was beginning. Epilogue: The Walls That Still Fall. Remember the opening, the seventh day at Jericho, Joshua's command to shout, the walls collapsing into rubble, an impossible victory that set the tone for everything that followed. Joshua was the personally appointed successor to Moses and a charismatic warrior who led Israel in the conquest of Canaan after the exodus from Egypt. His life is a testament to how divine power can manifest when one listens, believes, and obeys God. But Joshua's story asks difficult questions. Scholarly consensus holds that Israel did not take Canaan by means of a single, comprehensive, calculated plan of conquest. Archaeological evidence complicates the biblical narrative. Most scholars believe the conquest stories reflect later theological purposes rather than literal historical events. Yet the theological truth remains powerful. In Joshua, Israel is obedient. Joshua is faithful, and God fulfills his promise and gives them the land as a result. Yahweh's power wins the battles. The walls of Jericho fall because Yahweh fights for Israel, not because the Israelites show superior military tactics. Obedience versus disobedience is the constant theme. Obedience ties in the Jordan crossing, the defeat of Jericho and Ai, circumcision and Passover. Disobedience appears in Achan's sin and the Gibeonite deception. The central message: obedience leads to success, disobedience to ruin. In Jewish tradition, Joshua marries Rahab the harlot, and they have daughters, while in Christian tradition, Joshua remains a lifelong virgin, and Rahab marries Salmon, becoming an ancestor of David and Jesus. The names Joshua and Jesus are two versions of the same name, and early Christian interpreters saw Joshua's story as allegorically foreshadowing that of Jesus. Muslims also revere Joshua as the leader of the faithful following Moses' death, and Islamic literature identifies him as the attendant of Moses who met Khidr in the Quran. Today, when people face impossible obstacles, they remember Jericho. When faith seems irrational, they remember Joshua marching in circles for 7 days. When victory seems impossible, they remember the sun standing still. Joshua never asked for leadership. He was content being Moses' aide. But when God called, he answered. When God commanded strange strategies, walking around walls, dividing land by lot, making covenants with prostitutes and deceivers, Joshua obeyed. His commitment to following God's will, even when instructions seemed incomprehensible, highlights the importance of obedience and trust. His courage in moments of uncertainty serves as an example for those striving to surpass their own limitations. The walls of Jericho fell 3,400 years ago. But every day people face their own Jerichos, obstacles that seem insurmountable, challenges that defy conventional solutions, walls that human strength cannot breach. Joshua's legacy whispers across millennia. Sometimes God's strategies make no sense. Sometimes faith looks foolish. Sometimes obedience requires circling problems 7 times before breakthrough comes. But when walls fall, and they do fall, it's never because we were strong enough. It's always because God fought for us. The warrior who trusted God more than tactics. The leader who chose faith over fear. The man who stood with Caleb when millions cowered before giants. The commander who watched walls crumble, the sun stand still, and rivers pile up at God's command. Throughout his life, God spoke to Joshua directly, just as he spoke to Moses, when he was invested, after Moses died, before splitting the Jordan, before conquering Jericho, and at many other crucial moments. He lived 110 years. He conquered a land. He divided an inheritance. But most importantly, he proved that when God promises, he delivers. No matter how high the walls, no matter how many giants, no matter how impossible it seems. The walls came down. They always do. When faith stands firm and shouts at God's command.